Hello everyone, Rich Hagan alongside Hall of Famer Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, welcome along. Here we are at lunchtime on day 2, 6 rounds of limited gone, but we're going to focus on the 5 rounds of standard we've already had and the 5 rounds of standard waiting for us. Now, I don't know if you know this, but there are some unfortunate people out there who didn't see every minute of the coverage yesterday. They had jobs and school.
Why, but...
No, well, that's the usual 2 excuses, jobs and school. So if you haven't seen standard yet, what we're going to do is walk you through 7 of the big archetypes that were seen in multiples yesterday. So not the outliers, the core of the format, and just walk you through what everything's trying to do. So why don't we start out with the deck, I guess, Luis, that everyone knew was going to be here, and that is red-white vehicles. Why don't we put that up on screen for you? So here is just a sort of stock list of red-white vehicles.
Yeah, this is kind of the driving force behind the format.
Boo.
Look, I'm just trying to describe it in the most efficient way possible.
Boo.
So let me speed through this. And we've got red-white vehicles. It's the most straightforward aggro deck. It is trying to take advantage of Smuggler's Copter and a lot of cheap creatures. Toolcraft Exemplar is a really strong part of the deck. It's a 1-mana 3/2 in this deck most of the time. And if your deck can't beat red-white vehicles, it's surprising that you chose to play that deck. This deck was present in everyone's gauntlet.
Right. So why would you choose to play this?
It's a deck that is good at pressuring the opponent. You kind of don't have to know what the exact field is going to look like. When you're playing a deck like a control deck and you misjudge the field, you end up in a position where you can't win. Whereas if you're playing a deck like this that's proactive and pressures the opponent, you don't have to know exactly what your opponents are doing. You just have to know that you're going to kill them by turn 4 or 5.
All right, so there's an aggressive strategy. Let's take another one for you. We'll keep with red, and this time we'll add black to the mix. So here's an example of a red-black aggro deck. You see a lot of 4s on that list. Bomat Courier, Vendor's Apprentice, Pier Nalar, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Fiery Temper, Smuggler's Copter, Unlicensed Disintegration. It's just 4s everywhere, and that is always the sign of a super coherent plan.
Right, and this deck trades in some of the white cards for black ones and kind of harnesses Madness instead. Unlicensed Disintegration and Fiery Temper are both very powerful cards. Still using Smuggler's Copter, still using aggressive 1-drops, this time Inventor's Apprentice instead of Toolcraft Exemplar, but very similar decks. Also worth noting that decks like this often play Prized Amalgam and Haunted Dead and then turn to more of like a Grixis graveyard strategy, though many of the same cards.
Right, okay, so multiple ways you can go with red-black, but again, lots and lots of players were on red-black aggro. So now we'll keep the black, we'll add green to the mix, and this is a deck, Luis, that kind of looks backwards rather than forwards. With so many decks are being impacted heavily by Kaladesh. This time around, yes, there are plenty of Kaladesh cards here, but this is very much a deck that looks more like the previous standard in a way.
It's using a lot of the cards that we saw in the black-green Delirium decks at Eldritch Moon. This is a slightly more aggressive take with Blossoming Defense, Smuggler's Copter, Virtuous Gearhulk, but the core is very similar, and Traverse the Ulvenwald still plays like a prominent role where you're getting Delirium, your Gnarlwood Drides are getting bigger, your Grimflayers are getting bigger, and your cards overall are becoming higher quality.
So again, position this in terms of the metagame. Why would I sleeve this up?
This is a little bit bigger than the aggro decks. It's supposed to punch down against the aggro decks. You know, you have your Virtuous Gearhulks and whatnot. But it's also pretty fast still. Smuggler's Copter and Gnarlwood Dryad still pressure the combo decks like Aetherworks Marvel.
In Limited, we saw that blue-red wasn't a particularly popular archetype, with Whirl of Virtuoso being a really big deal. Let's see what blue-red might look like in Standard coming out of yesterday. Here is a blue-red spells deck coming up next for you. So we've got 4 Anticipate, 4 Dynavolt Tower. They see Take Inventory, 4 Harness Lightning, and so on. What's this deck trying to do, Luis?
It's really just trying to enable Dynavolt Tower. Every time you play a spell, you get 2 energy, and you can tap it and spend 5 energy to deal 3 to anything. Dynavolt Tower serves as a win condition and a way to keep the board clear of opposing creatures. This deck does a very good job of dealing with smaller creature-based decks.
Now, this is a deck that we haven't seen a lot of by definition in previous Standard. So if we're watching this on camera and we're trying to work out, is it ahead or not? Is it the use of the Dynavolt Tower that we should be looking for? Like, when it's to the face, they're winning. When it's killing things, it's losing. Is it that simple? I'm sure it's not that simple.
Certainly when it's going to your opponent's face, the Dynavolt Tower deck's in good shape. Because there's extra energy floating around to do that. I think that the way this deck loses is when it just doesn't have a Dynavolt tower. When it's using multiple cards to kill opposing creatures, but isn't actually progressing its game plan.
Okay. A good deck, do you like the blue-red spells deck?
This is one of those decks where if the metagame's right, this deck is excellent. If this deck plays against a bunch of Aetherworks Marvel decks or the Emerge Graveyard deck, it's going to have a little bit harder trouble.
All right, so next up, we've got a red-green energy deck. And this kind of, you see energy coming out of 4 Bristling Hydra. Long Tusk Cub likes energy very much. Servant of the Conduit gives you energy. Voltaic Brawler wants energy. Attune with Ether gives you energy. But there's no doubt that the core card to this deck, Louise, is Electrostatic Pummeler.
Oh yeah, that's the card that really kind of doubles the threats in this deck. You cast Larger Than Life or Built to Smash on the Pummeler. You can frequently double it twice because you have all these other energy sources, and you're just stacking up 20, 30 more, tons of damage. This is, again, to draw the comparison to Modern Infect, a deck that's trying to count to 20 using pump spells and really dangerous creatures.
Right, and often it counts to 20 and then keeps going and counts to 30, 40, 50.
Yeah, how high can you count?
Right, so a lot. Now, almost by definition, a deck like that is incredibly dangerous. And I was watching some people play test the day before the Pro Tour, and just the 3 words I kept hearing over and over are, am I dead? They've tapped out, they're doing their thing, and it's just like, am I dead? I've given up the game.
Definitely how playtesting against that deck works, like, am I dead, am I dead?
Right, so that's what you're going to see if we see Electrostatic Pummeler decks in action at the top tables, which we think we very may well. Next up, Jeskai Control. I didn't think we were allowed control decks at this Pro Tour.
Well, it is allowed. You're not going to see as many as you will see some of these other proactive decks, but Torrential Gearhulk is just a really good reward for building a control deck. It's a very powerful card. 6 mana for a 5/6 that replays an instant. If you can get the right mix of removal spells, card draw, and counter spells, you can end up with a great deck.
Okay, one more to go. Let's take you through Temur Aetherworks, because this is a real serious deck.
If I had to choose the breakout deck of the tournament, it is definitely the Aetherworks Marvel deck. This is the turn 4 Ulamog, turn 4 Emrakul deck. Just getting up to 6 energy, playing Aetherworks Marvel, using it, and flipping an Eldrazi. That's what this deck's all about.
All right. So that is the shape of Standard here at Pro Tour Kaladesh. It's time to buckle up because the Standard rounds are about to begin.